So again, today is Transfiguration Sunday, and I know that's a very churchy word, right? Transfiguration. Have you ever heard that word anywhere outside of church? You really have to think about it, right? Probably not. It's a really churchy word. But you hear it at least once a year on this Sunday in church. To be transfigured is to be changed in outward form or appearance. That's sort of the straightforward dictionary definition. To be changed in outward form or appearance. And so atop the mountain with Peter and James and John, with just his closest three disciples, Jesus is transfigured before them in a powerfully illuminating experience. This moment of transfiguration is not one where Jesus' essential nature or character or meaning is changed. He is not transformed, but rather it's a moment that reveals a new level of insight to those who witness it. Because they are now seeing Jesus outwardly in a new light. At the end of all of this, Jesus is still the same person he was just moments before, just as the scripture ends, right? All of Moses and Elijah, they're gone. It's just them there with Jesus. Jesus is still the same person he was moments before, the same person he has always been. His transfiguration unveils his truth in all of its glory for others to witness and more fully understand. One of my favorite descriptions of what that other churchy word, glory, means comes from, as we read in our bulletins earlier, comes from the 2nd century bishop, later named a saint, Irenaeus of Lyon in southern France, who said, the glory of God, what is the glory of God? It is the human being fully alive. And so in a moment of both awesome power and intimate vulnerability, Jesus is transfigured. A veil is lifted, and the glory of God, the truth, the fullness of who he is, radiates for others to see in a way that, well, he has not let happen up to this moment. And the question is, how will his disciples, how will those who witness this unveiling, how will they respond? Jesus is transfigured, and in response, those who witness transfiguration are invited to be transformed. I think we take for granted oftentimes that the disciples knew who Jesus was, right? That they got it from the beginning, or at least they got it by now, right? After all the time that they've spent together. Again, this is sort of the end of Jesus' ministry, but as Scripture makes clear time and time again, they did not. Any better than any of us has it all figured out, right? Up to this point, they've been traveling with Jesus, witnessing his teachings, his powerful healings. Right? We have to assume that they're spending hours upon hours walking from village to village with him, eating with him, sitting around a fire at night with him. And yet, time and time again, when Jesus asks, okay, you get it? Do you understand what I've just said? What I've just done? What just happened? Time and time again, it's clear that they don't get it. And so atop that mountain with Peter and James and John, Jesus' glory, his fullness is unveiled for them to witness with awesome clarity. And the proclamation ringing across the heavens with which Jesus' ministry began at his baptism, which we proclaim at every baptism, right? You are my child, my beloved child, with whom I am well pleased. This proclamation is now directed at the disciples. Did you catch that? This is my beloved. This is my child. Listen to him. It's a powerful, illuminating experience that they can never unsee or unhear. The story about being given new hearts, new senses with which to perceive God, to perceive the world. to witness something that has been there, been true this whole time, but in this moment we suddenly see it anew, kind of like an epiphany, right? We suddenly see it anew with breathtaking clarity as if for the first time. Crucially, it's also a truth that they will be challenged to take with them back down the mountain into the everydayness of life. A truth that they will be challenged to affirm and live in light of, even as life takes a terrible turn, even as Jesus' glory, his dignity, his worth is denied by those in power as they arrest him, as they mock him and beat him and crucify him, leaving his disciples terrified and alone. Will they hold fast to that truth that they know, even when the going gets rough? The glory of God is the human being fully alive. The courage to become fully human, to live fully, honestly, authentically as the human that God created us to be in a world that is constantly trying to dehumanize you, that will constantly try to use shame to get you to shrink yourself, to play small, trying to get you to let fear control the way you go through the world, right? Puffing yourself up with power or titles or accolades in order to cover over your insecurities, afraid that others will see the truth and they won't like what they see. Right? Our world sells us all kinds of products and all kinds of excuses for being anything but authentically the beloved child of God that we are. The irony is that our world has largely deluded itself into thinking that these things do make us shine brighter. But they're mostly just masks. They're veils. They cover the real thing. And it takes great courage, as Marianne Williamson says, to shine forth as the human being God created you to be. Because it's the most vulnerable thing that we can do. Because with vulnerability comes the possibility of rejection. Which is like dying on the inside while remaining alive on the outside. And in that sense, as those who worship a God whose power is most on display, we proclaim with the Apostle Paul in weakness. Power made visible in utter vulnerability in the incarnation and on the cross. The courage to become fully human is also where our humanity mingles with divinity most fully. If you ask me, this is at the heart of what it means to say that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. He accepted that journey. He lived into it in a way that most of us spend our lives running from. And he invites us on that similar journey. And just to make sure that you know that this isn't some new agey thing that I'm making up, it's actually an ancient and orthodox Christian understanding. The great 4th century African theologian, Athanasius, put it this way: God became human so that humans might become divine. That's a quote-unquote father of the church. Ultimately, the unveiling of Jesus' glory, his fullness, his transfiguration, is an invitation to not only see him in a new light, but to see ourselves and one another, to perceive the world around us in a new light, and then to live in the light of this transfiguration as a result. Right? All of creation is waiting to be transfigured before us. If only we have hearts to perceive, so that we, with the disciples, would be transformed, to live in light of the proclamation of God's irrevocable belovedness. Listen to him, the voice of God says to the disciples. Listen to the truth of one another, God says to us. Just as with the disciples, the question arises for us, how will we respond when others are transfigured before us? When they dare to unveil, to shine forth with the glory of God, revealing who God created them to be. When this new thing, this identity, whatever it is too much, too scary, too difficult, too confusing for us, will we, like Peter, try to stuff them back in a box, something that's more familiar, something that we can grasp or control? Let's build 3 little tents here, Jesus, one for each of you, right? That's surely what you want from us now. On the other hand, you have James and John who are silent. And I think there's a part of me that's like, well, maybe they're offering this appropriate silent reverence. There's something that's appropriate for the moment. But I realized as I sat with a text this week that it's not actually interpreted that way. It could also be that they are similarly overwhelmed like Peter. But while some of us blurt out like Peter in such moments, whatever is on the tip of our tongue, others of us shut down and are unable to stay engaged, perhaps like James and John. See, I think all 3 of them struggle in very relatable but different ways to honor Jesus' revelation. What does it mean to honor this unveiling, this revelation, this glory of God in another, even when we don't really understand it? What does that look like? I want to pause for a moment here, and I want to invite you to consider if transfiguration moments are, in some sense, moments that unveil God's glory, moments of awesome clarity, where you can see a truth, can see yourself, can see another, can see our world in ways that up to that point have been you've sort of missed. Well, then when have you witnessed transfiguration? Are there any moments that come to mind? You don't have to blurt it out like Peter. You can hold it there as you think about it. To get a little personal, there was a transfiguration moment for me, or a series of them, when I first met my wife and on our wedding day, right? That made me realize that I wanted to be on this life journey with her. I think of the birth of our baby in July, and to be honest, quite literally every day as I look at his face, right? Transfiguration moments for me. But I think of when a friend came out to me in college as gay. When as a pastor, a youth, came out to me as transgender. Right? These were also transfiguration moments. I could go on, but moments where they offered an unveiling. They shared a truth of their image of Godness that up to that point I did not know they were hiding. And in that intimate vulnerability, they offered it to me. I offer these few examples this morning because I want to make it personal. I want to get us thinking about our individual lives. And I have 2 reasons in particular. First, transfiguration moments are, again, in some sense, moments of mountaintop clarity that happen in the midst of life. They're not separated from, although we might, like a wedding, it's sort of a separate, sacred on the side thing, but it's in the midst of life, not separate from life, that we experience them. Which brings me to the second invitation I want to leave you with this morning. The challenge for us, like with the disciples, is not just how will we respond in the moment to transfiguration, although it is that. It is also to go back down the mountain from this experience and live in light of that truth, again, even when the going gets tough. Yes, the disciples, we have that moment of awesome clarity on the mountaintop with Jesus. God speaks directly to them. But on the other side of that mountain, again, lies Jerusalem, lie the events of Holy Week. It lies Judas's betrayal, lies the disciples' desertion and Peter's denial, lies Jesus' arrest and his mocking and beating and crucifixion at the hands of religious and political leaders. Right? Sure, we had that moment of awesome clarity with the one we so love and perhaps married, with the child at their birth, but honoring their fullness in the everydayness of life, amidst all the stresses, when life is not shiny or new, but covered in mud, when the sink is full, always full of dirty dishes, and the house is a mess, and dinner needs to be made, and bills paid, and you are beyond exhausted, and the cycles of shaming and blaming feel inescapable. What does it mean to live in light of the transfiguration in those moments? Sure, your friend or your child or grandchild came out to you, and maybe you were even supportive, handled it well. Maybe you had that moment where you came out and accepted yourself, but it's a whole nother thing to be publicly supportive of another, to not hide away that light, to be willing to also face the scorn or ridicule for choosing to stand by their side, to love them, to honor the glory of God daring to shine through them. The challenge for the disciples and for us ultimately is to keep choosing to honor this truth that was revealed to them in that mountaintop moment. To keep listening for the voice of God even when it isn't so clear. To stay close to our humanity in a world that will constantly try to strip it from us. Now, of course, the tragic, unsurprising reality is that we, like Peter, like all the disciples, will fail at this time and time again. We, like them, will betray each other. We will deny the glory of God in each other. We will not show up fully when others need us to. The forces of greed and pride and fear and insecurity will distort and dehumanize us. Our desire for comfort, for protection, all too often will desensitize us to the pain and humanity of others. If we're honest with ourselves, we know how this story goes. But as Paul says, we trust in a God who brings light out of darkness, and a God who brings forth water from a rock, who provides manna in the wilderness, who leads us to a land of promise on the other side of wilderness wandering. It is not death and despair that have the last word in our story, but healing and restoration, resurrection and new life. So again, what are your transfiguration moments? How are you doing at honoring that truth that was unveiled for you here in the everydayness of life? And rather than being overcome by shame, like the disciples and Peter in particular, how can you let God's grace and glory wash over you so that you can have the courage to begin again today? Become more fully human, more fully divine. Friends, may the glory of God's transfiguring love radiate in and through you. May it radiate through all the world. May we each be transformed in our witnessing of it. Amen.